The boardroom held its breath the moment I slid 3 envelopes across the mahogany table. Color abandoned Garrett Wainwright's face as his fingers closed around the first one. My resignation letter. His hand betrayed a faint tremor when he unsealed the second. The data center lease termination notice. But the third envelope was the one that hollowed him out completely. The renewal proposal. Triple the maintenance costs. No more discounts. No more favors. What? What is this? He stammered, his trademark arrogance dissolving into something that resembled panic. The other executives craned forward, jostling to glimpse the documents. 48 hours earlier, that same man had yawned in my face while carving up my operational budget, insisting the company couldn't spare $800 for dual monitors. Now he was staring at paperwork that would bleed Summit Technologies an extra $1.2 million every single year. My phone vibrated against the table. Another alert from the data center monitoring system. I left it there and watched Garrett's eyes ricochet between the envelopes and my expressionless face. "You can't do this," he finally choked out. I picked up my phone, killed the notification, and held his gaze without blinking. I already did. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where corporate karma completes its cycle. If you've ever been undervalued, overlooked, or dismissed outright by someone who assumed they held every card in the deck, you've found your people. Before I walk you through exactly how one budget meeting ignited a corporate catastrophe, help me build this community. We're closing in on 7,000 subscribers. People who believe workplace respect isn't optional, it's non-negotiable. Hit subscribe and join us. My name is Devin Winters, and until 2 days ago, I served as Director of Data Infrastructure at Summit Technologies, one of the fastest-scaling fintech firms in the Pacific Northwest. Over 7 years, I constructed their entire server ecosystem from scratch, holding the line at 99.99% uptime while trimming costs to 40% below industry standard. My father spent his career as a union electrician. My mother ran administration at an underfunded school district. Between them, they drilled one lesson into me. Honest work earns honest respect, regardless of title or tax bracket. I absorbed early that empathy isn't fragility. It's the discipline of seeing people as people rather than budget line items. Those roots shaped everything about how I led my team and stewarded our infrastructure. I never lost the memory of watching my parents wrestle with bills, of my father dragging himself home exhausted and still spending his evenings fixing neighbors' wiring for nothing in return. Those lessons traveled with me up every rung of the corporate ladder, through every certification, through every year managing a department of 15 skilled professionals. I believed in meritocracy. I believed that diligence, precision, and dedication would be seen and rewarded. I was wrong. The fracture began 6 months before that boardroom confrontation, though I couldn't read the signs at the time. Summit had just closed a Series C round, $85 million from a consortium of venture capital firms. The announcement arrived with the usual fanfare. A company-wide meeting, champagne in the break room, breathless chatter about expansion and growth. CEO Malcolm Hunt delivered an inspiring speech about scaling responsibly and guarding the culture that had carried us this far. Then they installed Garrett Wainwright as the new chief financial officer. Garrett materialized from a failed startup in San Francisco, though his LinkedIn profile had performed impressive gymnastics to rebrand that failure as a successful strategic pivot and acquisition. He wore expensive suits he somehow managed to make look cheap, and he'd mastered the art of checking his watch mid-sentence, a silent declaration that he'd already decided you weren't worth his attention. Our first encounter came during his second week. He'd convened a meeting with all department heads to audit operational efficiency metrics. I arrived with a comprehensive presentation. 7 years of data showing how my team had driven server costs 40% below industry benchmarks while actually strengthening performance and reliability. I was proud of that work. It was the product of years of meticulous planning, hard-won relationships, and creative problem-solving. Garrett spent the entire presentation scrolling his phone. "These numbers," he said without lifting his eyes, "seem inconsistent with market rates. That's because we negotiated a unique arrangement with. I'll need all vendor contracts submitted for review. We're likely overpaying." I paused, genuinely thrown. The data shows we're underpaying by significant margins. That's the whole point of. "I'll be the judge of that, Miss Winters." He still hadn't made eye contact. Send everything to my assistant by end of day, Miss Winters. In a company where the CEO and the interns were all on a first-name basis, Garrett had staked his hierarchy through deliberate formality. I sent the contracts. Silence followed. When I circled back 2 weeks later, his assistant relayed that Mr. Wainwright had reviewed the materials and found no immediate concerns. The subtext was unmistakable. I was wasting his time, but I had weightier problems to address. Summit was growing at pace, adding clients weekly, and our infrastructure was edging toward capacity limits. I had been planning for this growth, that was literally my function, but we needed to push the timeline forward. In August, I submitted a capital expenditure proposal. $125,000 to expand server capacity, bolster redundancy systems, and sharpen our monitoring capabilities. The request included detailed ROI calculations demonstrating how the investment would fuel projected growth and ward off costly outages. In every prior year, these requests cleared approval without friction. Malcolm trusted my judgment, and the previous CFO, a sharp woman named Diane Rothberg, actually read proposals before rendering decisions. Garrett rejected mine within 2 hours of submission. No questions, no meeting, just a single-line email. Request denied, insufficient justification for expenditure at this time. I scheduled a meeting, earned 15 minutes on his calendar 3 weeks later. When I finally settled across from Garrett in his office, he assumed the same phone-scrolling posture, radiating the same dismissive energy. The infrastructure upgrade is critical, I began, keeping my tone professional and precise. We're currently at 73% capacity, and our client acquisition rate projects will breach critical thresholds by Q4. Without additional resources, 73% sounds like considerable headroom. He finally looked up, one eyebrow arched as though I'd said something naive. In data infrastructure, operating above 70% capacity qualifies as high risk. We need buffer for traffic spikes, redundancy, and, Miss Winters, I respect your caution, but we won't commit 6 figures because you're uneasy with standard operational parameters. Learn to do more with less. That's how efficient companies operate. This isn't about unease. It's about preventing service disruptions that could cost us clients, and, if you can't manage your current resources effectively, perhaps we need to examine whether you're the right person for this role. The threat settled between us like a stone dropped in still water. My jaw tightened, but I held my composure. I've maintained 99.99% uptime for 7 years, while keeping costs 40% below. Yes, I've heard this statistic. You're very proud of your discounts. He flicked his hand. But past performance doesn't justify blank check spending. Request denied. I left that meeting with a cold clarity spreading through my chest. This wasn't about budgets or efficiency metrics. This was about power and ego. Garrett needed to establish dominance, and I had the misfortune of running a department he didn't understand but felt entitled to control anyway. I returned to my team and did what I'd always done. Found creative solutions. We optimized code, compressed data more aggressively, and deployed smarter load balancing. We wrested performance from our existing infrastructure through sheer technical skill and long hours. It worked mostly. We stayed ahead of the growth curve, but barely. My team was running on fumes, and we kept Summit systems running without a single visible crack. Then came the dual monitor incident. One of my senior engineers, a brilliant woman named Alexis Morrison, had been with Summit for 5 years and was indispensable to everything we did. She managed our most complex database optimizations and could untangle issues that would stump most professionals. For 3 years, she had been working on a single 24-inch monitor, constantly toggling between windows while managing multiple server environments at once. She never complained, but I could see it grinding her down. During our one-on-one in late October, I raised it. I'm putting together an equipment request for the team, I told her. Dual monitors for everyone who needs them. You're first on the list. Her expression brightened immediately. Really? That would make such a difference for the database migrations. Should have done it years ago. My fault for not pushing sooner. The request was modest. $800 per workstation for 10 team members. Total, $8,000. For reference, Summit had just spent $45,000 redecorating the executive floor with ergonomic furniture and wellness-focused design elements. Garrett's new desk alone costs more than monitors for my entire team. I submitted the request through proper channels, attached productivity metrics and ergonomic justification, and waited. The budget review meeting landed on a Wednesday morning in early November. Present were Malcolm, Garrett, COO Timothy Lang, and the assembled department heads presenting their quarterly requests. Marketing sought $50,000 for a rebrand. Approved, pending final proposal review. Sales wanted new CRM software at $30,000 annually. Approved with enthusiasm about potential ROI. HR proposed bringing in a consultant for $25,000 to improve workplace culture and employee engagement. Approved because apparently we needed a consultant to explain that people wanted basic equipment to do their jobs. My turn came. Kept it simple. I'm requesting $8,000 for dual monitor setups for the infrastructure team. This equipment will improve efficiency for complex multi-environment management and reduce eye strain during extended troubleshooting sessions. The productivity gains will easily offset the minimal investment. Garrett didn't even pretend to deliberate. He yawned, a slow, theatrical, full-body yawn, and tipped back in his chair. We can't spare $800 for dual monitors, he announced, as though this conclusion were self-evident. Then he uncapped his red pen and drew a thick line through my request on the printed agenda. The room went quiet. Timothy looked uncomfortable. Malcolm had drifted back to something on his tablet, only half present. It's $8,000 total, I said, keeping my voice even. For 10 engineers who maintain every system this company runs on. I heard you the first time. Request denied. Your team has monitors. They can keep using them. He was already scanning the next agenda item. Something snapped inside me. Not an explosion. More like a cable that had been stretched past its limit finally parting. Quietly. Decisively. Just to clarify, I said slowly, you're denying $8,000 for equipment that directly affects our ability to manage infrastructure. That's correct. He didn't look up. But you approved $45,000 for executive floor furniture last month. Now he looked up. His expression hardened into something cold. The executive environment directly affects our ability to close deals and maintain professional standards. Your team sits in a basement server room. Nobody sees them. Functionality is sufficient. Nobody sees them because they're keeping the lights on while everyone else takes. This discussion is over, Ms. Winters. Request denied. Move on. Malcolm surfaced from his tablet. Devin, I'm sure we can revisit this next quarter. Let's keep the meeting moving. I nodded slowly and sat back. But my mind had already departed the room entirely. I wasn't tracking the conversation anymore. I was running calculations. Specifically, I was calculating the precise value of my silence. For 7 years, I had managed Summit's data infrastructure under an arrangement that virtually no one outside a very small circle truly understood. When Summit was a scrappy startup operating out of shared office space, traditional data center contracts were out of reach. The major providers demanded long commitments and premium pricing, so I improvised. Through a former colleague, I connected with a regional data center company called Pacific Crest Solutions. They were newer, hungry for clients, and open to unconventional terms. I brought Summit in as a client, yes, but I brought something else along with it, my personal reputation and technical credibility. The owner of Pacific Crest, a veteran IT professional named Raymond Schultz, knew me from industry conferences. He knew my track record. He trusted that any company I was stewarding would be reliable, low maintenance, and professionally managed. Based on that trust, Raymond extended Summit an arrangement that had no real parallel in the industry. A month-to-month lease at 60% of standard market rates, on the understanding that I would personally oversee all technical dimensions and minimize the support burden on his team. In essence, Pacific Crest was betting on me, not on Summit Technologies. The arrangement was documented in our contract, buried in technical language that most financial people would skim past without absorbing. Section 7.32 specified that the preferential rate structure was contingent upon current technical oversight and relationship management protocols. In plain language, the discount existed because I existed, in my role, maintaining the relationship, managing everything so efficiently that Pacific Crest never had reason to lose sleep over Summit as a client. If I left, the preferential rate evaporated. Summit would need to renegotiate at standard market rates, approximately 2.5 times what they currently paid, or find a new provider, which would carry massive migration costs and serious operational risk. I'd walked Diane through this arrangement during her tenure as CFO. She grasped it instantly, thanked me for the innovative deal structure, ensured my compensation reflected my contribution, and approved budget requests without friction. She treated me like the strategic asset I was. Garrett had never bothered to understand any of it. He'd received the contracts during his review, registered the low figures, and apparently assumed Summit simply enjoyed favorable market rates through some ordinary competitive dynamic. He had no idea that Summit was saving approximately $1.2 million annually because of my personal relationship with Pacific Crest Solutions. And this man couldn't spare $8,000 for my team's monitors. I sat in that conference room, half hearing someone from product development discuss their budget needs, and made a decision that felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. I was done. Not frustrated. Not momentarily angry. Actually irrevocably done. I had spent 7 years constructing something I was proud of, leading a team I genuinely cared about, working for a company I believed in. But watching Garrett yawn while cutting my team's most basic request, after months of his condescension and short-sighted penny pinching, crystallized something I had been circling around for weeks. They didn't value me. They valued the results I produced while treating me as if I were simply the infrastructure itself, invisible, always on, requiring no maintenance. That evening, I joined a video call with Raymond at Pacific Crest Solutions. We'd held regular quarterly check-ins for years, keeping the relationship healthy and both operations aligned. "Devin, good to see you," Raymond greeted me warmly. "Everything running well on your end?" "Actually, Raymond, I need to raise something sensitive." His expression shifted. "What's going on?" "I'm planning to resign from Summit. I wanted to give you advance notice, knowing how particular our contract situation is." Raymond leaned back, processing. "That's significant. Can I ask what happened? You've seemed genuinely content there for years." I gave him the condensed version. New CFO, fundamental absence of respect, mounting difficulty doing my job with any effectiveness. "I'm sorry to hear that," Raymond said, and meant it. "You've been among the best clients we've ever had. And I mean you specifically, Devin. Your leadership is the sole reason we've been able to hold those rates for Summit." "I understand. That's precisely why I'm calling. I want to handle this transition with integrity. What do you need from me?" Raymond was quiet for a moment. "Contractually, our agreement ties the current rate structure to your oversight. If you're departing, Summit will need to renegotiate. Standard procedure calls for a 90-day notice period. Then rates shift to market levels. Which would be," he pulled something up on his screen, "for their current usage, approximately $1.47 million annually, compared to the $580,000 they're paying now. The figure hung between us. Nearly $1 million in additional annual costs. However," Raymond continued, "there's a clause in Section 7.32 that permits immediate rate adjustment if the key personnel requirement isn't maintained. That clause was included precisely because our preferential pricing was predicated on your involvement. So if you resign, the rate changes immediately, technically, though we typically extend a courtesy transition period." He paused. "But Devin, I'll be direct with you. Without your oversight, Summit becomes a considerably higher risk client. They've grown substantially, their demands have climbed, and frankly, I have little confidence in their technical judgment based on some of the requests we've been fielding lately." That caught my attention. "What requests?" "Their CFO's office has been reaching out, questioning our pricing, requesting detailed breakdowns that suggest they don't understand what they're actually paying for, floating out RFPs to budget providers. It's been concerning. I've been copying you on those emails." I checked my inbox. The forwarded messages were there. Several weeks' worth, filed away without my realizing they formed a pattern. Garrett's office had been shopping around, probing for cheaper alternatives, entirely unaware that he already held the best arrangement possible, and that his antagonistic behavior was on the verge of obliterating it. The irony was almost darkly funny. "Raymond, I need to submit my notice soon. Whatever Summit does afterward is theirs to manage. I simply wanted you to have fair warning." "I appreciate that, Devin. And for what it's worth, wherever you land next, if you need data center services or want to bring another client our way, you'll always receive the same treatment. You've long since earned that trust. We ended the call with mutual respect intact. I'd honored my obligations, warned my partner, and kept my professional integrity whole. Now I needed to draft a resignation letter. I spent the following evening writing it with care, professional, concise, offering the standard 2 weeks' notice.
No grievances aired, no brides torched, no elaborate explanations.
A clean, direct statement. I was resigning as Director of Data Infrastructure, effective 2 weeks hence, and would ensure a thorough transition of responsibilities. The second document was addressed to Raymond at Pacific Crest Solutions. Formal notification that I would no longer be serving in my current capacity at Summit Technologies, and that the special rate arrangement should therefore be adjusted per the contract terms. The third document was the one that settled something in my chest. A quiet, grim satisfaction. A renewal proposal that Raymond had prepared at my request, laying out what Summit's costs would look like under standard market terms. A 3-year contract at $1.47 million annually, standard support levels, no special accommodations. I printed all 3 documents, sealed them in separate envelopes, and tucked them into my bag. Then I waited for the right moment. It arrived 2 days later during the quarterly capital budget presentation. A full board meeting, executives and senior leadership gathered in person. Several board members dialed in remotely. Garrett stood at the front of the room, walking through the financial overview and highlighting cost savings with the quiet pride of a man who believed he understood exactly how things worked. Our operational efficiency has improved 12% over the previous quarter, he announced, clicking through his slides. We've maintained strict budget discipline across all departments, eliminating unnecessary expenditures and concentrating resources on revenue-generating activities. My phone vibrated on the table. A notification from the data center monitoring system, something I'd configured to send status updates during critical meetings. Malcolm, seated beside me, glanced reflexively at my screen, then looked at me with faint puzzlement. The alert was routine, but his glance reminded me with sudden clarity that I was still sitting in this room, doing my job, while Garrett accepted credit for efficiency that had been paid for primarily by denying my team basic tools. I stood up. Several heads turned, surprised by the interruption. "Devin, is everything all right?" Malcolm asked. "I need to address something time-sensitive," I said calmly. I walked to the front of the room where Garrett stood at the presentation screen. His expression traveled from confusion to irritation at the interruption. From my bag, I drew 3 envelopes and arranged them on the table in front of him, spread so their labels were plainly visible. The room fell into complete silence. Garrett's complexion began its transformation as he read the labels. Letter of resignation. Pacific Crest Solutions. Contract notification. Data center services renewal proposal. What is this? His voice reached for authority and fell short. The first envelope is my resignation, effective immediately, I said. My voice carried cleanly through the stillness. I'm forfeiting my notice period. The second envelope is formal notification to our data center provider that I'm no longer serving in my current capacity. The third envelope is the renewal proposal reflecting what our data center costs will be going forward. Garrett tore into the third envelope first, still not grasping the architecture of what he was looking at. I watched his eyes track the numbers. I watched the moment understanding reached him. His face went from pale to white. This says $1.47 million annually. We pay $580,000. This must be a mistake. No mistake. We pay $580,000 because 7 years ago, I negotiated a unique arrangement rooted in my personal relationship and professional reputation with Pacific Crest Solutions. That preferential rate was contingent on my direct oversight and management, as specified in Section 7.32 of our service contract. Malcolm rose from his chair and reached for the document. Wait, hold on. Devin, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that Summit Technologies has been saving approximately $890,000 annually on data center costs through an arrangement I personally established and sustained. That arrangement terminates with my employment. The renewal proposal reflects standard market rates. Timothy, the CEO, had pulled the document toward him, his face draining of color. This can't be right. We can't absorb an additional $1 million in annual operating costs. That would gut our margins entirely. You might have considered that before denying $8,000 for equipment my team needed to do their work, I said, holding Garrett's gaze. From the video feed, one of the board members, her voice sharp and controlled, cut through the room. Someone explain what's happening here. Why is our data center costs potentially rising by 150%? Garrett was leafing through the renewal proposal with increasingly frantic energy, searching for a crack in the logic. This is ridiculous. We can find another provider. There are dozens of data center companies that would charge you comparable rates. Yes, I said. And migration would cost approximately $200,000, require 4 to 6 months, and carry meaningful risk of service disruptions. You're welcome to explore those options. I won't be here to manage the process. Malcolm looked stricken. Devin, surely we can discuss this. If this is about the monitor request. It's not about monitors, Malcolm. It's about fundamental respect and recognition of value. For 7 years, I kept your infrastructure running without fault, while saving this company nearly $1 million annually through personal relationships and expertise. And your CFO yawned in my face while denying basic tools for my team, because he couldn't spare a rounding error in your quarterly budget. The room fractured into urgent murmuring. Board members pressing for answers through the video feed. Timothy typing furiously on his laptop, running numbers. Garrett cycling through denial, anger, and something approaching despair. I collected my bag and moved toward the door. Devin, wait, Malcolm called. We need to talk about this. Surely there's some accommodation we can reach. I paused in the doorway and turned back. Malcolm, you're a good person and you built something genuinely impressive here. But you empowered someone who prioritizes optics over substance, who cuts costs without comprehending value, and who treats expertise as disposable. I hope Summit succeeds, truly. But I won't continue in an organization that makes me fight for basic recognition. Name your price, Garrett blurted, desperation cracking through his voice. Whatever you want, salary increase, equity, anything. Just stay and maintain the Pacific Crest relationship. I studied him for a moment. Last week I would have stayed for $8,000 worth of monitors and a straightforward acknowledgement of my team's worth. Today there is no number high enough. Some bridges once burned are meant to stay burned. I walked out of the conference room, down the elevator, and out of Summit Technologies for the last time as an employee. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks, though I wasn't directly part of it. Word reached me through former colleagues who stayed in touch and through industry connections who found the whole situation darkly instructive. Summit attempted to negotiate with Pacific Crest Solutions. Raymond was courteous and professional but unmovable. The preferential rate had been a personal accommodation for me, not a standard commercial arrangement. At market rates, he was glad to continue serving Summit. Otherwise, they were free to look elsewhere. Summit sent RFPs to other data center providers. Quotes returned ranging from $1.3 million to $1.8 million annually. Several providers, upon learning I was no longer managing Summit's infrastructure, actually raised their figures, citing higher support requirements for clients without strong technical leadership in place. Garrett moved quickly to hire my replacement, hoping to secure someone who could either negotiate better rates or manage a migration. He discovered that senior infrastructure directors with comparable experience and track record commanded salaries $40,000 to $60,000 above what Summit had been paying me. Several candidates, after researching the company and learning the circumstances of my departure, withdrew from consideration altogether. The industry is smaller than most people assume, and word about how companies treat technical leadership travels quickly. Malcolm reached out personally 3 weeks after my resignation. We met for coffee at a neutral location. He looked exhausted. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. I should have been paying attention. I should have understood what you were contributing beyond simply keeping the servers running. I appreciate that, I said honestly. The board is furious. We're staring at roughly $900,000 in additional annual costs. Our margins can't absorb that cleanly. We'll have to cut in other areas, probably delay some expansion plans. I didn't respond. It wasn't my problem to solve. Garrett is on thin ice, Malcolm continued. The board considers this a catastrophic failure of due diligence and relationship management. There's talk of replacing him, but we're stuck with the transition for at least another quarter while we sort through the damage. What about my team? I asked. That was the part one still carried. Malcolm had the grace to look ashamed. We approved the monitor request, gave everyone raises and brought on 2 additional engineers to reduce the workload. Closing the barn door after the horse has gone, I know. They're good people. They deserved that support. They deserved it when you were making the case on their behalf. He paused. For what it's worth, I learned something very expensive here. Infrastructure isn't simply a cost center to be minimized. The people who build and maintain critical systems are strategic assets, not line items. Expensive lesson, I agreed. Is there any possibility you'd consider coming back? Name your terms genuinely. Garrett won't be in the way. The board has authorized me to offer whatever it takes. I'd anticipated this question and already settled my answer. Malcolm, even setting aside whether I wanted to, I can't. I spoke with Raymond last week. He's committed that infrastructure capacity to a new client. Someone I referred to him, actually. That door is permanently closed. Malcolm's expression fell. He'd been holding a thread of hope that some path back to the old arrangement still existed. Where are you going? He asked. What comes next? I allowed myself a small smile. I'm joining a startup as VP of Infrastructure and Technical Operations. The base salary is 20% lower than what Summit was paying. But there's meaningful equity and a leadership team that actually values technical expertise. They're building something interesting in the sustainable energy sector. Raymond is setting up their data infrastructure, preferential rates. Of course, Malcolm echoed with a sad smile. You're taking your gift with you. It isn't a gift, Malcolm. It's relationships, expertise, and mutual respect. Those things have measurable value. Garrett never grasped that. He looked at a spreadsheet and concluded that cutting costs meant effective leadership. He optimized for short-term savings without any understanding of long-term value. We finished our coffee with polite conversation. Industry trends, mutual connections, no residual bitterness on my part. Malcolm had made mistakes, but he'd never been malicious. Just inattentive. As we parted, he said one last thing. I hope your new company understands what they're getting. And I hope they're wise enough never to take it for granted. So do I replied. 3 months later, the announcement appeared. Garrett Wainwright had decided to pursue other opportunities, the corporate vocabulary for being shown the door. His LinkedIn profile soon reflected a much smaller company, a considerably less impressive title. Timothy, the COO, assumed financial oversight temporarily. Among his first acts was a company-wide memo on the importance of recognizing and retaining key talent, on distinguishing between cost-cutting and value destruction. Several of my former team members reached out. Alexis Morrison, the senior engineer who had set the whole thing in motion, sent me a message. Got my dual monitors. Got my raise. But it doesn't feel right. We all know what made these changes happen. It's embarrassing that it required your departure to make them see sense. Thank you for fighting for us, even when it cost you. I told her I appreciated the message, that she should remain at Summit as long as it served her career. No point in sacrificing her future over my grievances. But I added, if you ever want to explore the infrastructure challenges of sustainable energy, let me know. We're building something worth building over here. She joined my new team 2 months later. So did 2 other engineers from Summit, not because I recruited them. I made a deliberate point of never soliciting directly. But talented professionals talked to one another, and word had circulated that a better option existed. Summit eventually found equilibrium. They negotiated a modestly improved rate with Pacific Crest. Nowhere near the arrangement I'd secured, but roughly 10% below the initial renewal quote. They hired a capable infrastructure director at a premium salary. The company kept growing, though more slowly than projected, squeezed by the increased operational overhead. They survived, but the price extended well beyond the $890,000 in additional annual data center costs. They forfeited institutional knowledge, team cohesion, and the countless intangible advantages that come from leadership that genuinely understands the systems it depends on. All because someone couldn't spare $8,000 for monitors. My new role at Green Grid Innovations has been everything I'd hoped for. The company is developing smart grid technology for renewable energy distribution. The infrastructure challenges are substantive and meaningful. The leadership team includes the CTO in technical decisions and actually reads the proposals I submit. When I requested upgraded equipment for my growing team, dual monitors, standing desks, quality development tools, the CFO approved everything within 24 hours and attached a note. Let us know if there's anything else the team needs. Infrastructure is our foundation, and we invest in foundations. A revolutionary concept, apparently. I also work closely with Raymond at Pacific Crest Solutions. We're co-authoring a case study on how relationship-based contract structures benefit both providers and clients when managed through mutual respect and transparent communication. It will be published in an industry journal next quarter. The case study doesn't name Summit Technologies directly, but industry insiders will recognize the shape of it immediately. It has already become a cautionary reference that recruiters and consultants cite when discussing the hidden costs of poor technical leadership and the risks of misunderstanding infrastructure dependencies. Looking back, I don't regret my decision. Not for a moment. Could I have handled it differently? Perhaps. I could have given more notice, pressed harder to make leadership understand before things reached a breaking point, shown more patience with Garrett's learning curve. But here's what I know. Patience in the face of disrespect isn't virtue. It's self-abandonment. I spent months working within the system, documenting my value, filing reasonable requests, following every proper channel. Each attempt was dismissed, minimized, or ignored. At some point, continuing to accept that treatment sends a message to leadership, to your team, and to yourself that it's acceptable. It isn't. The dual monitor request was never really about monitors. It was a symbol of something far larger, whether Summit valued the people who made everything else possible. When Garrett yawned through that request after approving far larger expenditures for executive aesthetics, he answered that question with clarity. Some people might call what I did vindictive. They might argue I should have stayed, taken the high road, continued being the bigger person. To them I'd say this. The high road doesn't mean accepting a path that leads nowhere. Sometimes the most professional choice available is to make the consequences of short-sighted leadership plainly, unmistakably visible. I didn't sabotage anything. I created the Pacific Crest arrangement legally and ethically, disclosed it to appropriate leadership, and managed it flawlessly for 7 years. When I chose to resign, which is every employee's right, the natural consequences of that arrangement simply surfaced. Garrett's failure wasn't in denying the monitor request specifically. His failure was in never comprehending the systems and relationships that made his efficiency numbers look impressive. He accepted credit for savings he didn't create and couldn't sustain, then antagonized the person who had actually generated that value. That isn't effective financial leadership. That's borrowed time running out. A former colleague summed it up cleanly. You can't optimize what you don't understand, and you can't retain what you don't value. Summit didn't understand their infrastructure arrangements, and they didn't value the expertise that made those arrangements possible. They absorbed both lessons the expensive way. As for me, I'm building something new alongside people who recognize that investment in people and infrastructure isn't a cost to be minimized. It's a foundation to be strengthened. My team at Green Grid just received approval for a comprehensive training budget, new collaboration tools, and triple monitor setups for anyone who wants them. Not because we negotiated for them. Not because we made our case in triplicate. Because leadership understands that enabling talented people to do their best work is how you build something that lasts. It's remarkable what becomes possible when basic respect is the starting point rather than something you have to earn through crisis. The real payback wasn't the money Summit hemorrhaged, or the humiliation Garrett endured. The real payback was the clarity I gained about my own worth, and the reminder that expertise, relationships, and integrity carry value that no single employer can contain. Companies that recognize that value will thrive. Companies that don't will pay premium rates while wondering why their best people keep walking out the door. Summit Technologies learned which category they fell into. The cost. Approximately $890,000 annually in additional data center expenses. Plus the institutional knowledge of several experienced engineers. Plus their standing in a tight-knit industry. All for the price of an $8,000 monitor request and one CFO's ego. Some lessons can only be learned the expensive way. I doubt Garrett absorbed anything from this experience. People like him tend to externalize blame, to cast themselves as victims of circumstance rather than architects of consequence. But perhaps he's at his new, smaller company right now, slashing costs without understanding value, waiting for the next Devin Winters to teach him the same lesson again. Either way, it's no longer my concern. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been undervalued, overlooked, or passed over by someone who underestimated what you bring, subscribe to the Payback Office channel. We're building a community of professionals who understand that knowing your worth isn't arrogance. It's self-respect. Help us reach 7,000 subscribers who believe workplace dignity is non-negotiable. And remember, the next time someone yawns while dismissing your value, maybe it's time they learned exactly what that value costs.